My mother-in-law spent years trying to prove that my daughter was not really part of the family. She believed that one day she would catch me in a lie and destroy everything I had built. What she did not know was that the truth would end up destroying her instead. My name is Maren Whitlock. I live in Connecticut with my husband, Callum Whitlock, and our 6-year-old daughter, Eliana. From the outside, our life looked perfect. We had a beautiful home, a loving family, and a comfortable life. But behind closed doors, there was one person who never accepted me or my daughter. That person was my mother-in-law, Corinne Whitlock. From the day Eliana was born, Corinne treated her differently. She would stare at her for long moments and make strange comments. Sometimes she would say that Eliana did not have the same eyes as the Whitlock family. Other times she would claim that Eliana looked nothing like Callum. At first, I tried to ignore her. I thought she would eventually grow to love her granddaughter. Instead, her suspicion only became stronger as the years passed. Family gatherings were always uncomfortable. Corinne would ask questions that sounded innocent but felt like accusations. She often hinted that Eliana did not belong in the family. Some relatives laughed it off, but others started listening to her. The worst part was that Callum never believed his mother would go too far. Whenever I complained, he told me she was just old-fashioned and stubborn. He asked me to be patient and avoid arguments. I tried for years to keep the peace for my daughter's sake, but Corinne was not interested in peace. She became obsessed with proving that Eliana was not truly a Whitlock. While I was busy protecting my family, she was secretly planning something that could destroy my marriage forever. I had no idea that she was preparing a DNA test behind our backs. And I definitely had no idea that the results would expose a secret she had hidden for more than 30 years. As Eliana grew older, Corinne's behavior became harder to ignore. She never treated her the way a grandmother should. Whenever the family gathered for birthdays, holidays, or Sunday dinners, the difference was obvious. Corinne spoiled her other grandchildren with expensive gifts, hugs, and attention. Eliana usually received something small, if anything at all. At first, my daughter was too young to notice. But children are smarter than adults think. One Christmas, Eliana watched her cousins open tablets, bicycles, and gift cards while she unwrapped a coloring book and a pair of socks. She smiled politely, but later that night she asked me a question that broke my heart. "Mom, did Grandma forget about me?" I didn't know what to say. Things became even worse when Corinne started making comments in front of other relatives. She would stare at Eliana and say things like, "It's strange how nobody can tell who she takes after," or, "The Whitlock family usually has very strong features." The room would become quiet every time she spoke. I always tried to change the subject before Eliana could understand what was happening. But as the years passed, those comments became impossible to hide. One afternoon during a family barbecue, Eliana ran over to show everyone a picture she had drawn. Before anyone could compliment her, Corinne looked at her and casually said, "You certainly don't look like the rest of the family." The smile disappeared from my daughter's face. I felt anger rise inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Starting a fight would only make things harder for Eliana. That night, I told Callum that his mother needed to stop. I expected him to finally understand how serious the situation had become. Instead, he sighed and told me I was overthinking it. "Mom doesn't mean any harm," he said. "That's just how she is." But it wasn't harmless. Every cruel comment left a mark on my daughter. Every family gathering became something she dreaded instead of enjoyed. And while I was trying to protect Eliana from the pain, Corinne was quietly becoming more determined than ever to prove she didn't belong. After that, things started changing in ways I couldn't ignore. The comments were no longer coming only from Corinne. Other relatives began acting differently around me too. At first it was small things. Conversations would suddenly stop when I entered a room. People who used to call and check on us became distant. Invitations became less frequent. I couldn't understand what was happening. Then one afternoon, Callum's cousin, Brenna, accidentally let something slip. We were helping clean up after a family lunch when she looked uncomfortable and asked, "Can I ask you something without you getting upset?" I told her to go ahead. She hesitated before speaking. "Did you and Callum ever take a break while you were dating?" I stared at her, confused. "No. Why would you ask that?" Brenna immediately regretted bringing it up. She tried to change the subject, but I pressed her until she finally told me the truth. Corinne had been talking. Not openly. Not directly. She was doing it carefully. She would ask questions instead of making accusations. She would tell relatives that certain timelines didn't make sense. She would wonder out loud whether Eliana really looked like Callum. She planted doubt and then stepped back while everyone else thought about it. The realization made me sick. Corinne wasn't simply being cruel anymore. She was building a story. Over the following months, I started noticing more signs. Family members looked at me differently. Some became cold. Others watched me with suspicion. A few stopped speaking to me altogether. The worst part was that nobody confronted me directly. Instead, I was forced to sit through awkward dinners and uncomfortable conversations, knowing people were judging me behind my back. When I told Callum what was happening, he looked frustrated. He admitted his mother had probably been gossiping again, but he still refused to believe she would intentionally try to damage our marriage. I wanted to believe him. But deep down, I knew exactly what Corinne was doing. She wasn't trying to discover the truth. She had already decided I was guilty. Now she was trying to convince the rest of the family to believe it too. And little by little, she was succeeding. As summer approached, Corinne's attitude suddenly changed. For years, she had been cold, critical, and suspicious. Then almost overnight, she started acting strangely calm. She smiled more often. She stopped making sharp comments at family dinners. She even spoke to me politely a few times. At first, I thought maybe she had finally decided to move on. But something about it felt wrong. Every time I saw her, it was as if she knew something I didn't. There was a confidence in the way she carried herself. She looked like someone waiting for a big moment. That feeling stayed with me during Callum's uncle's retirement party a few weeks later. The entire family gathered at a large country club outside town. Everyone was eating, laughing, and catching up. For once, there was no tension in the room. Corinne spent most of the evening moving from table to table, chatting with relatives. She seemed unusually interested in where everyone was sitting and what they were doing. At one point, I noticed her carefully picking up a half-empty water bottle that Eliana had left behind. She slipped it into her purse when she thought nobody was watching. The sight struck me as odd, but I quickly dismissed it. There seemed no reason for a grandmother to do something like that. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts. Over the next several weeks, Corinne became even more cheerful. She started attending family events she usually avoided. She called relatives more often. She seemed excited about something she refused to discuss. Meanwhile, whispers continued spreading through the family. I could feel people watching me, waiting, judging. It was as if everyone expected something important to happen. One evening, I overheard Corinne on the phone while visiting her house. The moment she saw me, she ended the call and quickly changed the subject. A smile crossed her face before she walked away. Not a friendly smile. A victorious one. That's when a knot formed in my stomach. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew she believed she was close to getting exactly what she wanted. And whatever it was, she seemed completely certain that it would finally remove me and my daughter from the Whitlock family forever. A few days later, Corinne called every member of the family and invited them to dinner at her house. She claimed it was simply a chance for everyone to spend time together. Nothing about the invitation sounded unusual, but something inside me felt uneasy the moment Callum told me about it. When we arrived that evening, I immediately noticed how many people were there. Not just close relatives, but cousins, aunts, uncles, and even family members who rarely attended gatherings. The atmosphere felt strange. People were friendly, but many of them kept glancing in my direction. Some quickly looked away when I noticed. As dinner went on, the tension became harder to ignore. Corinne seemed unusually happy. She barely touched her food. Instead, she kept checking the clock on the wall. Finally, after everyone finished eating, she stood from her chair and tapped her glass with a spoon. The conversation stopped. Every eye in the room turned toward her. A nervous feeling settled in my stomach. Corinne smiled and thanked everyone for coming. Then she said she had invited the family together because she believed it was time for the truth to come out. The room became completely silent. I looked at Callum, confused. He looked just as surprised as I was. Then Corinne turned toward me. Her expression was cold and confident. She announced that she had arranged a DNA test. For a moment, I couldn't even process what I had heard. Several people gasped. Others stared at me without saying a word. My face burned with embarrassment. Corinne continued speaking as if she were presenting evidence in a courtroom. She claimed she had spent years watching things that didn't make sense. She said the family deserved answers. I felt sick. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was a public attack. The worst part was seeing relatives sit there and listen. Nobody told her to stop. Nobody defended me. Eliana was sitting beside me, completely unaware of what was happening. I wrapped my arm around her while trying to control my emotions. Corinne then revealed that the results had already been processed and would be arriving at any moment. A satisfied smile spread across her face. She truly believed she had won. She believed the next few minutes would destroy my reputation, end my marriage, and prove every accusation she had spent years spreading throughout the family. Writing, variant equals standard ID equals 89341. The waiting felt endless. Nobody spoke much after Corinne announced that the DNA results were on the way. The room was filled with tension. Some relatives avoided looking at me, while others watched me closely, as if they were waiting for me to confess to something. Then the doorbell rang. Corinne stood up so quickly that she nearly knocked over her chair. She hurried toward the front door and returned a minute later holding a large envelope. A smile spread across her face. She looked completely certain of what was inside. Callum looked uncomfortable. I could see the worry in his eyes, but he still believed this would all be cleared up once the results were read. Corinne slowly opened the envelope and pulled out several pages. The room became silent. She started reading. At first, her expression showed confidence. Then it faded. She blinked and looked at the paper again. For a moment, she seemed confused. I noticed her hands shaking slightly. "What does it say?" one of the relatives finally asked. Corinne didn't answer. She continued staring at the report. Callum stood up and walked toward her. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked. She immediately pulled the papers closer to her chest. That was the moment I knew something had gone very wrong. One of Callum's uncles reached for the report. After a brief hesitation, Corinne handed it over. He adjusted his glasses and began reading aloud. The first result was clear. Eliana was Callum's biological daughter. A wave of relief washed over me. For years, Corinne had questioned my loyalty, my marriage, and my daughter's place in the family. In a single sentence, all those accusations collapsed. Several relatives looked embarrassed. Others turned toward Corinne. But that wasn't the end of the report. Callum's uncle suddenly stopped reading. His face lost color. The room grew quiet again. "What is it?" someone asked. He looked at Callum before speaking. According to the DNA analysis, Callum did not share the expected biological connection to Everett Whitlock. For a second, nobody understood what that meant. Then the realization hit the room. Everett had raised Callum as his son. Everett had left him part of the family legacy. Yet the report suggested they were not biologically related. Gasps echoed around the table. Everyone turned toward Corinne. Her face had gone completely pale. The confidence she had carried all evening vanished. For the first time since I had known her, she looked terrified. And suddenly, the questions were no longer about me. They were all about her. The dinner ended in complete chaos. Nobody cared about the original DNA test anymore. The entire family was focused on the shocking information about Callum and Everett. Corinne kept insisting that there had to be a mistake. She demanded another test. She claimed the laboratory must have made an error. But nobody seemed convinced. For the next few days, relatives called each other constantly. Questions spread through the family faster than answers. Callum was devastated. He barely slept. He spent hours staring at old family photographs, trying to understand how something so important could have been hidden for so long. A second DNA test was arranged to verify the results. Corinne strongly supported it, clearly hoping the first report would be proven wrong. But when the second test came back, it showed the same thing. There was no mistake. The truth was now impossible to deny. After that, family members started looking into old records and documents. People began asking questions about Corinne's past. The more they searched, the more nervous she became. She stopped answering phone calls. She avoided family gatherings. Whenever anyone asked direct questions, she became defensive or angry. Then one afternoon, Callum received a call from his Aunt Lorraine. She had discovered a box of letters among Everett's old belongings. The letters were written decades earlier. Several family members gathered to read them. As the letters were examined, a painful picture began to emerge. Years before Callum was born, Corinne had been involved with another man while she was married to Everett. The relationship had remained hidden from almost everyone. There were references to secret meetings, unexplained absences, and conversations that suddenly made sense in light of the DNA results. The evidence kept growing. Eventually, Corinne could no longer deny it. During a tense family meeting, she finally admitted the truth. She confessed that she had an affair during her marriage. She had known for years that Everett might not be Callum's biological father, yet she never told him. Instead, she allowed Everett to raise Callum as his son and never revealed her doubts. The room fell silent. Many relatives looked shocked. Others looked angry. The woman who had spent years accusing me of dishonesty had hidden the biggest lie in the family's history. And as Corinne sat there facing everyone she had deceived, I realized something. The truth she had spent years chasing had finally found her first. After Corinne's confession, the Whitlock family was never the same again. For years, many relatives had trusted her without question. They believed her opinions, followed her advice, and accepted her version of events. Now that trust was gone, people started asking difficult questions. If Corinne had hidden something this important for decades, what else had she hidden? The family began reviewing old documents connected to Everett's estate. Attorneys were contacted. Financial records were pulled out of storage. Boxes that had not been opened for years suddenly became important. What started as a search for answers quickly turned into a much larger investigation. Every week seemed to bring another discovery. Old letters confirmed details that Corinne had denied for years. Financial records showed decisions that had been made based on assumptions about family relationships. Conversations that once seemed harmless now looked very different. Tension spread through the family. Relatives who had defended Corinne during the DNA scandal slowly changed their position. Some apologized to me directly. Others admitted they should never have believed the rumors she spread about me. One afternoon, Brenna came to my house carrying a small gift for Eliana. She looked embarrassed. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. I knew she wasn't the only one who felt that way. Over the following months, more relatives reached out. Some admitted they had doubted me. Others confessed they had avoided me because they believed Corinne's accusations. For the first time in years, people were finally seeing the truth. Meanwhile, Corinne found herself completely alone. The same family members who once gathered around her now kept their distance. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls became rare. People no longer trusted anything she said. What surprised me most was that I didn't feel victorious. I had spent years being blamed for things I never did. I had endured humiliation, gossip, and suspicion. Yet watching Corinne lose everyone's respect didn't bring me happiness. Mostly, I felt sad for Callum. He was still trying to process everything he had learned about his past. While the family argued over records and inheritance questions, he was struggling with something much deeper. His entire understanding of his family history had been shattered. And through all of it, one fact remained impossible to ignore. Corinne had spent years trying to destroy my place in the Whitlock family. Instead, she had destroyed the foundation of the family she worked so hard to control. As the investigation continued, more details about the family's finances and history came to light. Lawyers spent months reviewing documents connected to Everett's estate. Every new finding seemed to create another problem. Corinne tried to defend herself, but nobody was willing to listen anymore. For years, people had accepted her word without question. Now they questioned everything she said. Family meetings became tense and uncomfortable. Whenever Corinne spoke, someone would challenge her version of events. Relatives who once sat beside her now avoided eye contact. Others openly disagreed with her. The change was impossible to miss. One day, Callum received a call from a cousin who had always been close to Corinne. Even she had decided to distance herself. "None of us know what to believe anymore," she admitted. That sentence seemed to summarize how the entire family felt. The woman who had spent decades influencing every important decision no longer had any influence at all. Even simple family gatherings changed. Corinne was still invited to some events, but the atmosphere around her was completely different. Conversations would stop when she approached. People politely excused themselves and walked away. For the first time, she was the outsider. I remembered all the years I had spent sitting through uncomfortable dinners while relatives whispered about me. I remembered feeling judged without being given a chance to defend myself. Now Corinne was experiencing that same loneliness. One afternoon, I saw her sitting alone at a family event while everyone else talked in small groups nearby. Nobody was arguing with her. Nobody was attacking her. They simply didn't trust her anymore. That seemed to hurt her more than anything else. Her relationship with Callum also suffered. He still cared about his mother, but things were no longer the same between them. The secret she had hidden affected every conversation they had. The bond they once shared had been damaged in a way that could not easily be repaired. As months passed, Corinne's world became smaller and smaller. The respect she valued was gone. The authority she enjoyed was gone. The trust she depended on was gone. She had spent years trying to isolate me from the family. In the end, she found herself standing alone, surrounded by the consequences of her own choices, with nobody left willing to defend her. By the following spring, life felt very different. The constant tension that had followed our family for years was finally gone. There were no more rumors, no more accusations, and no more gatherings filled with suspicion. For the first time in a long while, our home felt peaceful. Callum still struggled with everything he had learned. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when he questioned parts of his childhood and wondered how different his life might have been if the truth had been known from the beginning. I understood those feelings. What hurt him most was not the DNA result itself. It was realizing that the people he trusted had allowed him to live with a lie for so many years. But slowly, he began to heal. One evening, while we were sitting on the back porch after Eliana had gone to bed, he said something I will never forget. "I spent months trying to figure out where I came from," he told me. "Then I realized something. The people who love me are my family. Nothing can change that." It was the first time I had seen real peace in his eyes since the truth came out. From that moment forward, he stopped looking backward. Instead, he focused on the future. We spent more time together as a family. We took weekend trips, celebrated small moments, and created new memories. Eliana laughed more than she had in years. The shadow that had hung over her childhood was finally gone. As for Corinne, she remained part of the family, but things were different. The influence she once held had disappeared. People treated her politely, but the trust she had broken never fully returned. The consequences of her choices became part of her everyday life. I never sought revenge against her. I never needed to. The truth had done everything on its own. Looking back now, it still amazes me how everything started. One woman became so determined to prove that a little girl did not belong that she ignored the damage she was causing. She believed she was exposing someone else's secret. Instead, she uncovered her own. The DNA test that was meant to tear my family apart ended up revealing the biggest deception the Whitlock family had ever known. And in the end, the truth protected the people who had done nothing wrong while exposing the person who had spent years trying to weaponize it against others.